My name is Mira Dalton, 29 years old. I create outfits for people who don't just want to look good, they want to be unforgettable. My workspace sits on the corner of Harbor Lane in Eastburn City, perched 4 floors above a tiny dumpling cafe that always smells like steam, spices, and sleepless ambition. It's messy, noisy, and full of life. That's what home feels like to me. The message came just as I was finishing the edge of a satin sleeve under the shaky glow of my old desk lamp. Evan, you dress like an exhausted freshman art assistant. I can't show up anywhere with you looking like that. I blinked at my phone, letting the words settle. The first emotion wasn't anger. It was pure disbelief. Then a dry, sharp laugh escaped me. We'd been together for 7 months. Evan worked in public relations for a high-end tech company. Polished shoes, perfect hair, perfect ego. The kind of man who checked his reflection in every elevator door. He often told me I had promise, the same way someone describes a rundown apartment with good lighting. I wiped my hands on my paint-stained apron and read his message again. If you can't dress properly, maybe just skip the company gala. A thin line of sweat trailed down my neck. I wasn't sure what hurt more, his embarrassment, or how casually he tossed it at me like it was nothing. Across the studio, my cat Piper named that because she once chewed through my measuring tape was curled on top of a heap of unused chiffon. She lifted her head and stared at me with the kind of judgment only a cat can manage. Even she seemed offended on my behalf. I typed back, "Okay, I'll sort something out." He responded with nothing but a thumbs-up emoji. The thing Evan didn't know, what no one in his polished little world understood, was that I wasn't some hobbyist stitching for fun. I am my own brand. I built him de-atelier from nothing but grit and sleep, deprived nights. My designs had been worn in national campaigns, album covers, red carpets, just never with my name plastered across them. I let the work shine, not my face, and when you spend your days surrounded by dyes, fabric scraps, and patterns, you learn quickly. You don't wear delicate linen or overpriced heels. You wear what survives creation. For me, that meant worn-in jeans, tank tops smudged with chalk, hair knotted with whatever ribbon or tape I grabbed first. It wasn't neglect. It was a uniform built for art. Still his words replayed. You dress like an exhausted freshman art assistant. Funny, coming from a man whose monthly grooming products cost more than some of my early rent payments. My so-called laundry day hands had crafted gowns that sold for more than his quarterly commission checks. I set my scissors down and stared at the roll of deep midnight violet silk resting on my table, imported from Sorel province. It had cost me nearly 4 months' savings back when I first opened the studio. I'd been holding on to it for something meaningful. Maybe this was the moment. 2 evenings later, Evan invited me to dinner. Business casual, he said, which I'd learned actually meant blend in. Blend with me? The restaurant was one of those dimly lit wine-by-the-ounce places where everyone pretends to enjoy meals that look like garnish. Evan was already seated with a small group of colleagues. He waved me over with a smile that was polite but completely empty. "Hey, Mira," he said, standing just long enough to pretend he had manners. "Everyone, this is Mira." One of his coworkers, a woman named Lee, looked me up and down like she was appraising a clearance rack. "Oh, you're the artsy one, right?" Evan jumped in before I could react. "She does outfit styling, costume stuff." I corrected gently, "I design wardrobe pieces." Lee smirked. "Right, like for student theaters or indie sets." Before I answered, Evan sighed theatrically. "She's still trying to build up her business. You know how passion projects go." My jaw tightened. Trying, my last commission had been featured on the cover of Mode Italia, but I smiled anyway. "You must be excited for the gala. Lee said. Evan told us it's full black tie. Are you planning on renting something? I'll manage, I replied. Evan cleared his throat. We're still deciding what she's going to wear. I nodded politely, but inside, something tore. Not anger, just that quiet shift you feel before a seam splits clean down the middle. Back home, I stood before the mirror in my workshop. There was my reflection, hair undone, skin flushed from work, jeans stiff with dried paint. This was me. The woman who shaped beauty from scraps and imagination, but to him I wasn't art, I was a risk, an eyesore. He wanted perfection for one night. Fine, I could give him perfection. I let my fingers glide across the silk again. Midnight violet, with a soft silver sheen beneath the light. It felt like the night sky holding its breath. I knew exactly what I would create, a gown that would silence the entire room. While Eastburn City hummed outside, I cut the first pattern. Every slice was a tiny rebellion. Every stitch whispered, "You don't get to define me." A week passed. Evan kept sending messages, remember, it's formal, maybe don't go too flashy. I'll send you some ideas. He sent pictures of cookie-cutter dresses, the kind that hang in mall windows begging to be forgotten. Safe, bland, empty, none of them were me. I didn't respond. Instead, I stayed in my studio until sunrise, sewing in perfect silence while low jazz hummed through my old speaker. Inside the lining of the gown, I stitched something special, saying my mother once repeated whenever people underestimated her, "Let them talk, they'll clap later." By the time I tied off the final thread, dawn was spilling over the rooftops. The gown shimmered like spilled stars. Piper stretched and yawned from her perch, clearly unimpressed by my hours of genius. I laughed softly. 2 weeks of swallowing every jab, every dismissive comment, every attempt to shrink me. The gala was the next night. Evan called before bed. "Just promise you'll keep it classy, okay? Big night for me." I whispered, "Don't worry, I'll make it unforgettable." He chuckled, missing the edge entirely. That's my girl. When the call ended, I stared out the window at the neon sign flickering from the dumpling cafe below. My reflection glowed faintly in the glasses. Eddie, calm, quietly powerful. He thought I'd embarrass him. He had no idea I'd been preparing to reveal the truth without saying one unkind word. Outside, the night smelled of soy broth and light rain. Somewhere deep inside, something settled, maybe not healed entirely, but aligned. The days leading up to the gala felt like waiting for a storm. Not the loud, violent kind that rattles windows, but the thick, heavy kind that makes the air tighten and your instincts sharpen. Evan had gotten smug. The more he critiqued my clothes, the more he seemed to believe he'd been assigned the role of my personal stylist, without my consent. He started showing up at my apartment unannounced, carrying glossy shopping bags like offerings. "Babe," he'd say, wearing that strained smile. "I saw this on discount, thought you could try it for the gala." He pulled out a pale rose-colored dress made of cheap satin, the kind that wrinkles if you breathe on it. It looked like something a bridesmaid would have worn at a rushed low-budget wedding 15 years ago. I offered a thin smile. "It's very pink." He beamed, completely missing the note of sarcasm. "Exactly. Soft, feminine, classic, you know. Something with a little polish." There it was again. Polish, he said it like I was an old doorknob needing a shine before guests arrived. After he left, I hung the flimsy pink dress in my studio, right beside the midnight violet gown I'd been crafting in secret. The contrast made me chuckle. One begged to be overlooked, the other warned, "Don't blink." The following weekend, his closest friend Renee invited us to brunch. She worked with Evan and seemed to consider herself the guardian of his public image, always ready to steer him, and apparently me, in the direction she approved. The moment I sat down, Renee leaned across the table with a smile that was a little too sugary to be sincere. "So, Mira, did you finally find something appropriate to wear? she asked. Appropriate. I echoed, raising an eyebrow. She giggled behind her mimosa glass. You know what I mean. The company has expectations. No offense, but your earthy, creative aesthetic might confuse our partners. Evan didn't even react. He simply nodded along, silently agreeing, which somehow felt worse. I cut into my pancakes with slow precision. Don't worry, I said quietly. I'll definitely make an impression. Renee laughed as if I'd told a harmless joke. Just not the wrong kind, okay. Evan shot her a warning glance that basically said enough, but the wound was already made. They didn't realize it, but every jab, every smirk, every patronizing little remark was another thread tightening around something I was building. Not just a dress, but a moment. That night, I poured all of that quiet humiliation into my work. Each stitch of the gown held a confession. Each shimmering bead a response I'd never bother voicing aloud. The gown transformed night after night, not just into a piece of fashion, but into a beautifully kept secret, a rebellion wrapped in midnight violet. Long, fluid panels of midnight, violet silk flowed like water every time I moved. I stitched faint silver constellations across the back, patterns inspired by the sky I saw through the old skylight above my workshop. This wasn't revenge, not exactly, it was truth. If Evan wanted to see what appropriate looked like, I would show him the art he spent months underestimating. 3 nights before the gala, he dropped by again, this time more jittery than smug. His eyes darted around my studio, taking in the piles of fabric, sketches, and tools. So did you find something to wear, for the gala? I smiled softly. I did. He narrowed his eyes. Can I see it? Not yet, I replied. It's a surprise. He frowned. Mira, this isn't really the moment for surprises. My director will be there, investors too. It's important that we look compatible. I finished for him. I was going to say presentable. Don't worry, I said calmly. You'll look fine standing next to me. He froze for a second, clearly unsure whether I was comforting him or warning him. That night, as I stitched the final seam, I caught my reflection in the dark window. My face looked different, not harsher, just steadier. Women like me, artists, builders, dreamers, were always told to shrink, soften, fit neatly inside someone else's expectations. But comfort had never created anything remarkable. I let that truth burn quietly as I added the final hidden touch, a tiny embroidered monogram inside the hem. My mark, my thread, my name MD Aitlier where no one could erase it. The next evening, while Evan was out schmoozing with executives, I tested the gown under real light. I dimmed the workshop lamp and let the warm glow from the window spill across the silk. The silver constellations shimmered like starlight caught mid-breath. I turned slowly, and for the first time in a long while, I saw myself. No frills, no apologies. Just a woman who turned her quiet ache into something breathtaking. My phone buzzed, a message from Evan. Please don't make this a statement. It's my night too. I stared at it for a long moment, then set the phone down. That was the difference between us. For him, this was about impressions. For me, it was about truth. I turned off the light and whispered to the gown. Tomorrow, they'll finally see what you see every day. The silk shifted slightly, as if it understood. In that dim studio, surrounded by fabric, dreams, and quiet defiance, I smiled, not a bitter smile, but the kind of steady, knowing smile that only comes when you already know how the story ends. The night of the gala arrived like the final scene of a film I'd been replaying in my head for weeks. Rain slicked the streets of Eastburn City, turning neon lights into rivers of gold. My taxi stopped in front of the Haldencrest Hotel, its marble columns gleaming under crystal chandeliers, visible through towering windows. I hadn't told Evan I would be arriving alone. He'd texted earlier, still half condescending. Black tie. Don't overthink it. I glanced at my reflection in the taxi window before stepping out. The midnight, violet gown glowed like a still lake at night. The silver constellations remained soft until light kissed them. Then they sparked to life. My hair was pulled back simply, nothing dramatic. The dress carried its own voice. No need for extra noise when you are the moment. The doorman blinked, then grinned broadly. "Ma'am, you look extraordinary. Thank you," I said, stepping inside. The ballroom was a galaxy of polished suits, satin gowns, laughter, and champagne clinking under chandeliers. Evan was by the bar, surrounded by colleagues back turned, laughing easily, perfectly in his element. Then he turned. The second his eyes landed on me, the laughter died in his throat. His glass froze halfway to his lips. Conversations around us softened, like the air itself had paused to watch. I walked toward him slow, deliberate, my heels tapping softly on the marble floor. "Hi, Evan." He swallowed hard. "Mira." His voice wobbled just a little. You look fine," he muttered. I smiled softly. "Presentable," I added almost kindly. His colleagues traded startled glances, one of them. A tall man in a charcoal suit finally broke the silence. "That dress is something else." Before Arman could respond, another voice cut through the room. Older, authoritative. "An extraordinary piece," said Mr. Calloway, Arman's CEO, "and that's hand embroidered, isn't it?" He stepped closer, examining the silver patterns shimmering under the chandelier. "The craftsmanship is remarkable. Who designed it?" I returned the smile politely. "That would be me." A hush fell. Liana, who had drifted over to Arman's side, sucked in a sharp breath. "You made that?" "Yes, Mr." Calloway's eyebrows rose. "Mara Ellison." I nodded. "That's right." "Good heavens," he murmured, his expression transforming. "My wife owns 3 of your pieces. We spent months trying to get on your custom list." In an instant, the entire atmosphere shifted. Whispers, recognition. Liana looked like she'd bitten into a sour fruit. Arman looked torn between panic and pride. Mr. Calloway extended his hand. "It's a privilege. We're planning a rebrand for our luxury division. I'd love your insight sometime." "Of course," I replied smoothly. "We can arrange that." He clapped Arman on the shoulder, completely unaware of the tension tightening around us. "You didn't mention your girlfriend was that Mara Ellison. Keeping secrets, are we?" Laughter rippled around the group. Arman tried to salvage his dignity. I didn't think it mattered. Not relevant." Mr. Calloway chuckled. "You're dating one of the most gifted designers in Ravenport." I gave a small smile, watching Arman swallow hard. "He prefers to keep things low-key." The table laughed again, not realizing the edge hidden inside the words. The rest of the night unfolded like poetic justice. People approached me nonstop asking for business cards, collaborations, consultations, the same things Arman used to dismiss as just her little hobby. At one point, his coworker Mason leaned closer and whispered, "You know, Arman told us you were trying to start a small online shop. Didn't realize you were the brand." I met his eyes calmly. He tends to underestimate what he doesn't understand. Mason smirked. "Looks like he's getting educated tonight." Later, as the music quieted and the champagne's buzz softened the room, Arman pulled me aside. His hand trembled on my arm. "What was that?" he hissed. "What was what?" You embarrassed me." I blinked slowly. He actually believed that? "You could have warned me. Would you have believed me if I had?" He didn't respond. His jaw clenched, caught between apology and accusation. "You lied to me," he finally said. "You let me think I wasn't enough." I finished. "No, Arman, that was your conclusion." Before he could speak again, Mr. Calloway called across the room, "Mara, we're gathering for photos. Come join us." I smiled sweetly. "Excuse me. Apparently, I look appropriate now." I walked away, the silver constellations on my gown flickering like stars breaking free. When the night finally ended, I stepped outside alone. The rain had stopped, and Ravenport smelled of wet pavement and expensive perfume. In the hotel's window, I caught my reflection. The gown glowed faintly under the streetlight. A quiet smile tugged at my lips. He spent months embarrassed by how I looked. Tonight, he was the one disappearing behind me. A taxi pulled up. I lifted the hem of the dress, stepped inside, and didn't look back. The next morning, I woke up smiling. Not because life was perfect, but because it was finally clear. The gala had exploded through Arman's office overnight. A photo surfaced online, the one where Mr. Calloway rested a proud hand on my shoulder while praising the brilliant designer, Mara Ellison. By morning, the comments were wild. Isn't this the girl friend he claimed was unemployed? Wait, that's the designer from Ellison 8 Lear. Imagine insulting a fashion designer because she doesn't shop high street brands. I didn't repost. I didn't comment. The truth was handling everything on its own. Arman, meanwhile, was falling apart. He called me 6 times before noon. When I finally answered, his voice was trembling, trying to sound calm while everything burned behind him. "Mara, we need to get ahead of this," Arman said, voice tight. "People are talking," he added, almost in panic. "About what?" I asked calmly. "About last night. They think I didn't know who you were. You made me look foolish. Did I?" I said softly. "Or did you do that yourself?" He exhaled deeply, the sound of a man used to controlling the story. "Look, can we at least align on what to say? Technically, you never mentioned your label name, so this could be framed as a misunderstanding." My tone cut through his PR panic like a sharp blade. "Arman, you told your colleagues I was a struggling hobbyist. You told them you were embarrassed by me. Which part of that counts as a misunderstanding?" Silence. Finally, he muttered, "I didn't mean it like that." "And how exactly did you mean it?" His sigh deepened. "You have to admit, Mara, you can come across unconventional." I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. "That's what creativity looks like, Arman, not confusion." By afternoon, he had switched tactics entirely. A new post appeared on his Instagram feed. "So proud of my talented girlfriend at Mara Ellison's studio." Couldn't be happier to support her journey. The photo was a close crop from the gala, his arm barely visible next to me, smiling proudly. The comments came quickly. "Bro, weren't you embarrassed by her last week? Supporting her journey after she carried the entire night." He deleted the post within hours. That evening, he showed up at my studio. I almost didn't answer the door, but curiosity won. He stood there, dark circles under his eyes, holding a bottle of wine like an offering. "Merit, can we talk?" I folded my arms. "Make it quick, I'm working." He glanced around, taking in the racks of gowns, sketches pinned across the walls. I didn't realize how successful you were. You always dressed so." He trailed off, hunting for a word that wouldn't make him sound worse. "So normal," I offered. He nodded weakly. "Yeah, I thought you didn't care about appearances." "I don't," I said, returning to my sewing table. "That's exactly what makes me different from you." He flinched but pressed on. "Look, I messed up, okay? I was insecure. I wanted to impress my boss, and I projected that onto you." "Projected?" I repeated, almost amused. "You didn't project. You belittled repeatedly." He set the wine down. "Can we start over?" I leaned against the table, calm but precise. "You had 8 months to start over, Arman. You just kept pressing repeat." After he left, I sat alone in my studio, surrounded by the hum of sewing machines and the soft pulse of jazz. For the first time, I felt exhaustion not from heartbreak, but from carrying someone else's expectations like extra weight. I thought of all the women who'd been told to shrink, soften, smile quieter, dress better just to make someone else comfortable. Not anymore. A few days later, I met with Mrs. Calloway, the CEO wife, She had called after the gala, her tone bright and genuinely curious. "Mara, darling, I've been obsessed with that gown since I saw you walk in. My friends haven't stopped talking about it. How soon can we collaborate? We met at a cafe overlooking the river." She wanted to launch a limited edition charity fashion line, with proceeds supporting women's shelters. I agreed instantly. When she raised her glass, she smiled knowingly. "Your story will sell itself. Everyone loves a comeback." I smiled softly, a little sadly. "It's not a comeback when you were never the one who fell." Back at MD Aitlier, news of the collaboration spread. Orders poured in. A journalist reached out for an interview. My inbox overflowed with inquiries from people who had never glanced twice at that messy designer in jeans. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very image Arman had mocked had become my brand's strength. That night, Arman sent one last text. "I'm happy for you." "Really? I just wish you hadn't made me look so bad." I stared at it for a long moment before replying. "You looked exactly like who you chose to be." Then I turned off my phone. I sat by the window, Ravenport glowing beyond the glass, and whispered, "You don't need someone to believe in you when you already do." The needle on my sewing machine clicked back to life. I hummed softly, stitching new beginnings from old threads. The interview was supposed to be a simple lifestyle feature, just a few questions for an online magazine about women in business. But nothing about that week was simple anymore. The journalist, a young woman named Clara, arrived at my studio with a camera and a list of questions that went far beyond fabric and thread. She'd clearly done her homework. "How does it feel," she asked gently, "to go from being underestimated to becoming one of the most talked about designers in the city?" I smiled faintly. Strange, like everyone had suddenly found the volume knob on my life and turned it up. She laughed softly. "And your partner, Arman, right, how's he handling all the attention?" I paused. The hum of the sewing machine filled the silence for just long enough. "There is no we anymore," I said finally, "but I'm handling it just fine." Her eyes softened. "Would you say what happened motivated you?" I looked down at the gown I was sewing. "No," I said quietly. "It revealed me. There's a difference." By the time the article went live, the headline read, "The woman who redefined what dress to impress really means." The accompanying photo captured me mid-laugh, thread in hand, sunlight spilling through the studio windows behind me, authentic, unstaged. Beneath it, a quote, "When someone tells you you're not enough, they're just showing you what they lack." Mara Ellison, the piece went viral. Clients doubled overnight, and then, as if on cue, Arman reappeared. He sent a polite, measured message, almost corporate in tone, inviting me to dinner for closure. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Part of me wanted to see if he had changed. The rest of me wanted to be sure I had. The restaurant he chose was all gilded accents and imported roses, the kind of place that mistakes silence for sophistication. When I arrived, the hostess led me not to a table for two, but to a round table set for four. My stomach sank. Then I saw them, Arman's parents. His mother, Elinor, wore a string of pearls and a practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. His father, Charles, had already poured himself a glass of expensive wine. Arman stood awkwardly beside me, gesturing toward the seats. "Mara, I thought it'd be nice for my parents to meet you," he said, wincing slightly. "It's important." Curiosity outweighed politeness, so I sat. Elinor leaned forward immediately. "We've heard so much about you, dear. Arman says you run some kind of fashion startup." "Something like that," I said evenly. Charles smiled thinly. "And it's doing well financially, I hear. Quite impressive for an independent operation." But their tone wasn't admiration. It was calculation. Every question after that carried a price tag. "How stable is your business? Do you plan to expand or stay small scale? Would you ever consider merging your income, say, for a joint investment? Halfway through, the truth settled like a cold stone in my stomach. This wasn't dinner. It was an interview, and the position they were considering wasn't future daughter-in-law. It was financial insurance policy. I set down my fork carefully. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," I said softly. "I design clothes, not lifeboats." Eleanor blinked. "Pardon?" I turned to Arman, my voice calm but surgical. "You told them, didn't you, that I could help you upgrade your lifestyle?" He swallowed hard. "It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that," I said. Charles cleared his throat, uneasy. "There's no need to get emotional." "I'm not emotional," I interrupted. "I'm just realizing this dinner wasn't about meeting your family. It was about evaluating my worth." Eleanor tried to recover with a brittle smile. "We just want what's best for our son. Then maybe let him earn it," I said. The table fell silent. Only the faint clink of glasses from nearby diners filled the space. I reached for my purse and stood. Arman's voice broke. "Mara, please don't do this here." I looked down at him, my tone almost kind. "This is the last time you'll have to be embarrassed by me, Arman. You can stop worrying about how I make you look." He didn't move. His mother's lips parted, as if to speak, but I didn't give her the chance. As I walked away, the hostess tried to hand me my coat. I shook my head. "Leave it, I like the chill." Outside, the air was cool and cleansing. For a moment, I simply stood beneath the warm glow of the restaurant sign, breathing deeply. When I finally arrived home, I noticed something caught on the back of my gown. A single silver thread had pulled loose from the hem. I smiled quietly. Even the smallest imperfection reminded me this story, my story, was entirely my own. The loose thread dangled and swayed as I walked through the studio door, catching the soft glow of the lamp. I smiled, a tiny knot around my finger, the last connection to a pattern I'd finally decided to stop fixing. I whispered, "For every woman who's ever been told to look smaller, may she never learn how." Then I let the thread fall. The silence after that dinner didn't last long. People like Arman never let it. A few days later, my phone buzzed incessantly. At first, I thought it was about my latest collection. Then I saw the headlines. Influencer Arman Ross opens up about emotional manipulation by designer X. He'd gone public. There he was, perfectly lit in a casual interview setup, playing the misunderstood boyfriend. "She hid who she really was," he said solemnly. "I thought we were building a life together, but she was testing me, making me feel small so she could have the upper hand." I was unbothered. I could almost hear the script in his voice. Victim narrative, tragic romance turned cautionary tale. He'd always been good at controlling perception. Now perception wasn't his to control anymore. Comments split sharply, half calling me cold, half seeing straight through him. "Funny how a man's ego can't survive when the spotlight shifts. Every woman knows an Arman." I didn't respond. I didn't post, I didn't flinch, because real, deliberate silence is louder than any defense. 2 days later, my assistant Mia rushed into the studio, phone in hand. "You need to see this," she said. It was a direct message from Mrs. Calloway. "I saw Arman's interview. My husband and I are so sorry you're dealing with that nonsense. By the way, I'd still love for you to design something special for our anniversary. The city is talking about you for all the right reasons." I laughed softly, a mix of disbelief and relief, when I met Mrs. Calloway for the design consultation. She leaned in conspiratorially over her espresso. "You know, I heard Arman's side first," she admitted, "but then I remembered the way he spoke to you at the gala. Condescending, dismissive. It was written all over his face." I smiled. "Perception catches up eventually." She grinned. "And karma has excellent taste and timing." While Arman's story faded, mine grew. The collaboration with the Callaway Foundation went viral not because of the clothes, but because of the message. Each limited edition gown carried a small silver tag engraved with a quote, "You can't outshine a woman who stopped needing permission to glow." Orders flooded in. Celebrities shared photos. Every time my name appeared, his narrative faltered. He tried to drag me back into the mud, but I was already walking on marble. One evening, around closing time, a knock sounded on the glass door of my studio. I looked up and froze. Arman stood outside, soaked from the rain, clutching a crumpled umbrella. No cameras, no entourage, just him. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the door. He stepped in, water dripping onto the polished floor. "Mara," he began softly, "can we talk?" I crossed my arms. "You already did, on camera." He flinched. "That was a mistake. The PR guy said it would help. I felt like I lost control of everything. Because you did," I said evenly. He glanced around the studio gowns, sketches, the framed article on the wall. "You're everywhere now. Everyone's talking about you." "That's the thing about truth," I said. "It's louder than lies, but it takes patience." He exhaled slowly. "I never meant to hurt you." I tilted my head. "But you did, over and over. Not because you didn't know better, but because you did and you didn't care." His eyes glistened. "I loved you before all this." "No," I said softly. "You loved the version of me that didn't challenge you. The one who dressed down, smiled quietly, and made you feel taller." He stepped closer, voice breaking. "Can't we try again?" I shook my head. "You want forgiveness so you can feel good about yourself. That's not the same as being sorry." His shoulders sagged. Then something desperate flickered in his eyes. He pulled out his phone and began recording. "Say it," he whispered. "Say you're done with me, that you never loved me." I almost laughed. "You still think this is a show, don't you?" "Please, Mara." I stepped forward, voice calm and steady. "You want content? Fine, here's your clip." I looked straight into his camera. "Love isn't supposed to humiliate you. It's supposed to see you. You didn't lose me, Arman. You let me outgrow you." He lowered the phone slowly, speechless. I opened the studio door. "Good night, Arman." He stood there for a long moment, soaked, his reflection fractured by the glass as I locked the door behind me. Later, Mia texted me a screenshot. Someone had leaked part of Arman's recording. The segment where I spoke went viral within hours under the hashtag #OutgrowYou. Women everywhere were stitching their own stories, walking away from belittling relationships. For the first time, my voice, not just my designs, was part of something bigger. I closed my laptop, leaned back, and smiled. He had come to destroy my peace. Instead, he amplified my purpose. 3 months passed, the headlines faded, replaced by newer stories. Mine, however, had settled into something steady, quiet. The storm had cleared. Clarity remained. My studio had changed. Walls that once felt empty now buzzed with energy assistants cutting patterns. Clients dropping by with flowers, music floating through the air. Laughter returned, late nights returned, but this time fueled by purpose. On one wall hung a framed print of the viral quote that had started it all. "You didn't lose me. You let me outgrow you." Every day, women messaged the studio with stories of jobs left, marriages ended, dreams reignited. Some bought one of my gowns simply to feel visible again. And maybe that was the point, not revenge, not redemption, but visibility. One morning, Mia burst in. "Guess who's on the front page of Elle?" The magazine lay on my table. There it was, Mara Ellison, the woman who sewed power back into femininity. "They make it sound like you stitched a revolution," Mia said. "Maybe I did." I smiled, taking my coffee. A week later, I was invited to a charity gala, this time as the honored designer. Same venue, same chandeliers, but a different world. In the marble foyer, I caught my reflection in a mirrored wall. No glittering gown tonight, just a sleek black jumpsuit, silver earrings, hair pulled back, confident and effortless. Cameras flashed, people greeted me by name, but my focus stayed grounded. This wasn't about the spotlight, it was about the light I'd built for myself. Halfway through the evening, a familiar voice reached me, Arman, across the room, thinner, quieter. The crowd no longer orbited him. Our eyes met. He froze, then offered a small, cautious smile. I returned a polite nod. Nothing more. That gesture said everything words couldn't. I'm done fighting you. You're not my story anymore. Later, when the applause faded and stage lights dimmed, I stepped outside. The city glowed beneath me, 1,000 windows flickering like stars. I thought about the woman I had been, the one who dressed smaller so love would feel easier, who laughed off insults, who mistook silence for safety. She was gone. In her place stood someone who finally understood. Softness and strength aren't opposites. They're threads of the same fabric. The next morning, I boxed the midnight blue gown, the one that started it all. I slipped a handwritten note inside to the woman who wears this next. May you never confuse humility with hiding. I donated it to a charity auction for women rebuilding their lives. Letting go didn't feel like loss. It felt like freedom, space to become. That evening, I walked home through Ravenport streets, paint, stained jeans, old linen shirt, hair tied with measuring tape. The way I always used to. A teenager passing by glanced at me, then took. Wait, are you Mara Ellison? She asked. I smiled. Sometimes, she beamed. I love your work. You make me want to design. Then you should. I said. Don't wait for anyone to tell you when. She nodded shyly, walking off. For a moment, I watched her disappear into the crowd, a glimpse of my younger self, finally free. Back at the studio, city lights flickered through the windows as I turned on the sewing machine, needle clicking in rhythm, steady and sure. As the thread caught the light, I whispered softly, when someone is ashamed of you at your simplest, they don't deserve your masterpiece. A pause. Then a quiet smile. Style fades, character doesn't. The machine hummed on, stitching another chapter, another chance, another life. And this time, every piece began with peace.